CBS Sports HQ presented by Capital One. So we are less than a week away from finding out the official schedules, including dates for each NFL team. That will be released next Wednesday, May 15th. But we do know each team's opponents. And CBS Sports has put together the list of who has the toughest schedules. Browns coming in at number 1, but turns out the entire AFC North, maybe without the Bengals, will have a tough go of it with the Ravens and Steelers all in the top 5. Let's welcome into our set Leger Douzable, Kanell here. DK, we'll start with you. What do you make of the AFC North? I will mention the Bengals are at 16, so not in the top 5. 16th.
Yeah.
Wow.
Surprising.
They have a much easier schedule than any other team in their division.
Yeah.
The division is insane, though. When you look at last year, 3 teams in double digits, all over 500, and the worst team was 9-8 with the Bengals, who were missing Joe Burrow. Yeah. For a majority of that, that is an absolute gauntlet, which is great to see because historically this has been one of the more, vicious divisions to have to go through. And so I think the fact the Browns had this resurgent year last year was a big part of it. But I think this is an absolute gauntlet for these teams to go through.
Yeah, DK, you stated it already. This is the toughest division in football, but I think it's hilarious that people always talk about strength of schedule. Let's just go back to last year. The Jacksonville Jaguars, a lot of people thought they could win the AFC because they thought they had one of the easiest schedules. And if you look at a team that was in first place in their division, they had the easiest schedule for a team that was in first place, and they went 9-8. The Houston Texans were tied for last place last year in regards to odds to go to the Super Bowl. And what did they do, DK? They won the division. Not only that, they went to the divisional round of the playoffs. So I think it's always hilarious when people bring up strength of schedule because it's based off what teams did last year. There's a whole offseason where teams revamp their teams. But I do agree with DK. This is a gauntlet in itself in the AFC North. We talked about it. 3 teams made the playoffs. And we talked about the year of the backup quarterback. A lot of these teams had to deal with backup quarterbacks. When you talk about the Bengals, the Browns, I mean, the Ravens were the only team in that division that didn't have to play a backup quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how the AFC North plays out. But I just think it's hilarious that people always talk about strength of schedule because there's so much that goes into that, not just what you did last year.
I think there's such little variation, too, between the hardest schedule and the easiest schedule.
Correct.
Like in college football, you can get some cakewalks. Yeah. There is not a cakewalk game where you're going to be favored by 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Sure.
Every single game you can get beat if you don't show up.
Yeah, I'll tell you talking about a difference of, sorry, Amanda, Browns at, the winning percentage of 547, and the easiest schedule is like 460.
Falcons at 453.
Right. Yeah, so it's really, you're right, it's not that much different. Leger is basically saying that we should end the segment now. Right, it doesn't matter. It's hilarious.
The schedule's hilarious to me.
Producer Jack.
Good job, Jack.
Hilarious for putting this together. By the way, you mentioned the Texans last year and what little was expected of them and how they overcame all those lack of expectations in such a young team. Well, this year, a ton of expectations, and they are tied for the 4th toughest schedule among the teams that they have to play. They have to go to Kansas City on the road.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you win the division. I think for people that don't understand how schedules are made, you play your division, which is 6 games, and then your division alone plays 2 other divisions, and then it's about where you're placed from last year. So because they're number 1, you talked about it, they have to play the Kansas City Chiefs, who were number 1 in the division. They have to play the Buffalo Bills. They have to play the Detroit Lions in the NFC North, who to me is probably the strongest division on the NFC side. So you talked about it, this team has a lot of expectations after having none the year before. They add a guy like Stephon Diggs, really retool that defensive line. Daniil Hunter comes in, Danico Autry. So you imagine this team, after what they did last year, is going to take a massive step. But by the strength of schedule, it's going to be a gauntlet they have to go through. Not only their division getting better, but playing the NFC North as well.
They should take a massive step forward, but understandably, there are some questions and why I think it's legitimate. C.J. Stroud, can he replicate and build on what he did last year? I think he can, but we all know how it goes when you start getting a whole entire season, an off season, where defensive coordinators are game planning for you, for your weaknesses, for what they think they can exploit. Then all of a sudden you're going to get tested that much more. How do you handle success? An entire offseason, everybody telling you how good you are. Sometimes that can be a false sense of security.
And the pressure that goes with it.
And then the pressure that comes along with that. So there's a lot of question marks for the Texans that I think they're ready for, but they have to go out and prove it because you don't want to be that team that's just a fluke that we've seen before in history of the NFL.
Packers T4 with the Texans for hardest strength of schedule going into next season. So that would give them Leger, don't write on this. The hardest schedule in the NFC. They finished 9-8 last season behind the 12-5 Lions in the NFC North. I mean, the Lions are going to be a gauntlet in themselves this season. But look, they made it to the postseason. They made it to the divisional round, lost to the 49ers. Thoughts on the Packers?
Yeah, Danny brought up a real good point with the Houston Texans. I feel the same way about Green Bay. Like, now you're the hunted. Last year, they won a lot of games down the stretch. People forget they were almost out of playoff contention midway through the seasons, and they were questioning whether Jordan Love was going to be the guy of the future. But them last 6 weeks of the season, I don't know if there was a quarterback that played better football than Jordan Love. Well, this will be a different situation because now people are looking at them like, this is a really good team. Like, we're not going to cakewalk into this game versus the Green Bay Packers. They're going to get everybody's best shot. So you wonder with those young players, and DK, you know this, as a young player sometimes, there's a naive confidence, right? You don't know what you don't know. So a lot of times those young players were just going out there and playing football. Now there's added pressure because people expect them to be really good this year. So I can't wait to see how Jordan Love, these young receivers, that young secondary bounces back this year. Can they meet expectations of what they did last year?
Yeah, that's what it's all about for me. The youngest team in the NFL, that can be a great thing because they were good. They weren't great last year.
Correct.
And so maybe they're hungry to get a taste of the playoffs, and all of a sudden they're like, ooh, this is kind of fun. When you get to do that and you get that postseason game check, you're like, okay, this can be what we are capable of. But I think it does revolve a lot around Jordan Love. Similar to C.J. Stroud, you've got more tape on him. How does he respond? How does he, for an encore performance, how does he come up there and elevate his game to the next level? Because he was outstanding, as you mentioned it, the last 6 or 7 games of the season. But this is an organization which is used to competing for division titles. Now it feels like they're back in that mix. They've got to show that they're sustainable as well.
And Leger said he thinks that's the toughest division in the NFC. The Chicago Bears, by the way, have one of the easiest schedules. We'll get to them in just a little bit. Let's move to the Cowboys, who are kind of in the middle of the pack. They're tied for the 12th toughest schedule in the league. Amanda's shaking her head.
You just always like they're just going to be the middle of the pack.
It's like
that's how you feel about them.
I mean, like, yeah, like you make it a postseason, congrats.
Rack up some more regular season wins because they get to play the NFC South, which is, on paper, the easiest division in the league.
It feels that way. They should. And again, look, I know Amanda's frustrated. I think a lot of Cowboys fans are frustrated because you've been racking up wins in the regular season. It's all about the postseason. And I don't think this year will be any different because I do think they should have an outstanding chance to win the division. I think they have an outstanding chance to make the playoffs again.
You think they've had even given the Eagles collapse, but what they've done in the postseason?
Yeah, I think the Dallas Cowboys are the team to beat in the NFC East.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah, I still do. I think the Eagles.
They've been pretty much co-favorites much of the
and like I don't think the Eagles' issues are completely fixed with different coordinators. I think there's some deeper issues beneath the surface. I think the Cowboys are ripe to make a run, and I think they get it done. I know there's frustration as well because they haven't had that big splashy offseason. But I think you're talking about a team that had 12 wins last year. They can tweak, and they don't have to make big splashy moves. They just have this team to elevate in the postseason.
So we're on opposite sides of the
fence. We have mini Jerry Jones.
I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to struggle this year. Right? When you look at what they've done, retooled offensive line, they lost 2 of their better starters in Tyler Biadasz, who went to a divisional foe, Tyron Smith, who went to the Jets. They drafted the guy who I really like in Tyler Guyton, but he's only played 1 start at left tackle. And now Cooper Beebe, who they took in the draft, they expect him to play center. DK, you want to guess how many center snaps he's actually had in college?
Ooh, see, now he's played a lot of offensive line because he was like a 4
He played guard, tackle, everywhere else.
Not many.
0 in-game situations at center, and this is the guy that's going to make that transition to start potentially for you at center. And then you look at defense. They lose Dan Quinn, right? And he brought a lot of those depth pieces with him as well. So Mike Zimmer's a really good defensive coordinator. I just think the overturn of this team, and like you said, not bringing in new guys, not even doing business with their own guys.
I mean,
they have yet to extend any of their guys.
Are you so excited?
I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to struggle this year.
You see the win total there, highest since 2008 at 10.5. So that kind of goes hand in hand with what Danny says. But Leger thinks the Cowboys will struggle. When you look at the odds in the NFC, it's the 49ers at the top. They are right there with the Chiefs to win it all. And I think most books have the 49ers as the favorites to win the NFC because the NFC is looked at as an easier conference than the AFC. Then you have the Lions and Eagles and Cowboys right there at plus 650. Back on HQ, presented by Capital One. These are the 6 easiest schedules this upcoming season using opponents' winning percentage from last season. And every team in the NFC South is on here. Let's get Danny Kanell and Leger Douzable back in here. I heard you guys talking in the break. Someone suggested relegating the entire division.
It's going on multiple years here, too.
It literally
that they
is.
have not been very good. Like post-Tom Brady and the Bucs run to the Super Bowl, it's been atrocious, and it's hard to see much light at the end of the tunnel. I think clearly the Falcons offseason move, making the big splash with Kirk Cousins. You know, you can talk about the Michael Penix draft, but he's got a lot of weapons. I think they're the team that feels ready to elevate the entire conference. But the Bucs were okay last year. Are they going to take a massive step forward? I don't know, especially losing their offensive coordinator. The Saints were okay. Can they make a step forward without doing anything this offseason because they had salary cap issues? And then the Panthers, it's hard to envision. We do see a lot of teams every year come out of nowhere. I don't think it's going to be the Panthers, but I mean, you could maybe. I just don't see much hope for this conference outside the Falcons maybe being a team that can make a deep postseason run.
Yeah, DK, during the break we were talking about this, and when you look at these 4 teams in this division, it seemed like the Saints and the Bucs kind of stayed pat in the offseason, right? The Bucs signed a lot of their guys back. Saints signed Willie Gay. They didn't sign a lot of people in the offseason. So it's like, if you're the Saints, like, how do you intend to compete with the Atlanta Falcons, who get a Kirk Cousins, sign Darnell Mooney, bring in Raheem Morris, who is a extraordinaire on the defensive side to fix that side? And to your point, like, I don't see a team probably winning 10 or 11 games in this division. I think the Atlanta Falcons probably have the best chance because they have the best quarterback right now on paper. It all depends on if Kirk Cousins is back to what he was last year. But this is a division where you expect the team to win maybe 9 or 8 games and win the division. Like, I don't see a team winning 10 or 11 games in this division.
You guys both think that Baker Mayfield is below Kirk Cousins?
I do.
Quarterback-wise. And if you look at what Kirk Cousins did last year, in the first 8 weeks of the season, he was probably a top 2 quarterback.
Yeah, MVP was meant to.
Yeah, literally. Like,
had great weapons in Minnesota, though.
Well, they have great weapons in Tampa, too, though.
As producer Jack points out, Baker Mayfield already has more playoff wins than Kirk Cousins does.
Baker Mayfield, if you look at his career, it's hard to trust. Like, he's got to prove consistency. That's the one thing he's lacked. Because even going back to his rookie year, he's had a rookie record for touchdown passes. Then he had a setback. Then he was back up. And then it was back down. For whatever reason, now he's got Dave Kanell gone. So there's another issue that Baker Mayfield has to overcome. I like him. I'm glad they kept him. I think they got a good, a deal that made sense for him on the table. But to me, he's got to prove he can do it every year. If you look at Kirk Cousins' career, he is always top 10 in almost every major passing category. Does it translate in the postseason or on the bright stage? Not always, and we know that's his issue. But as far as consistency, he's going to give you that.
And I'm so glad you brought up Dave Canales, because let's not forget, when Dave Canales was in Seattle, Geno was a Pro Bowler, right? Last year, Baker Mayfield had one of his best seasons, or maybe best seasons yet, with Dave Canales being there. Now he's gone in Carolina. We'll see how Baker Mayfield bounces back without his offensive coordinator, because Dave Canales, for some odd reason, gets the best out of quarterbacks wherever he's at.
We're going through the easiest schedules here for the upcoming season. By the way, 121 days away. We wanted to figure that out. Bears had a lot of things handed to them. Here you go. Here's Caleb Williams. Here's Rome Odunze. Somehow you got both of those guys in the first round. They also have the 5th easiest schedule. But Leger, you pointed out earlier, doesn't always matter.
It really doesn't. And if you look at the schedule, I talked about the NFC North being probably the strongest division in football. I think the NFC West is right behind them. That's going to be a gauntlet when you talk about this.
All of the NFL? Or
no, just NFC, on the NFC side, right? And that's who the Bears have to play. They have to play the Rams, the 49ers, the Seahawks. I think Arizona's going to be much improved this year as well. So the NFC North, I talked about it being the toughest division in football. That's a gauntlet in itself for the Bears. I think they'll be much improved. I heard a lot of people talking about playoffs. I don't know about that, because when you talk about the Detroit Lions, you talk about the Green Bay Packers, and even Minnesota, we were just talking about the playmakers they have. If they get good play out of Sam Darnold, they could muddle around. I mean, with a backup quarterback last year, they were 1 game out of the playoffs as well. So this is going to be a tough schedule for the Bears. I know it, by the strength of schedule, it's the 4th easiest in the football. And I love what the Bears did on defense the last 6 weeks of the season, but it all comes down to Caleb Williams. It depends on how accurately and how fast he can accumulate or get ready for the NFL season. If he can play at a high level, the Bears have a good chance.
I hate that I'm doing this, because it's a flip of a coin. It's more of a crapshoot than anything, but I am buying in on Caleb Williams.
Really?
A rookie quarterback, #1 overall pick. I think they make the playoffs. I said that even a couple months ago here on this set. I think the Bears are positioned to make a run, and they're positioned to elevate. And it does all come around to Caleb Williams. He's got the best situation we've seen out of a #1 overall pick easily in the last decade and maybe in the history of the NFL. He's got talent and weapons around him. You've got a division that does have some question marks, like Minnesota. We talked about Green Bay earlier. Detroit, they're still kind of new to this stratosphere where they're all of a sudden projected, to be a team that can contend in the playoffs. So I think it is built. I think it all comes down to Caleb Williams. I think he responds. He's always done it everywhere he's been along the way. But as we've seen in the course of the NFL history, #1 overall picks, it is basically the flip a coin. I think he's up to the task.
The one thing I think that nobody is talking about is new offensive coordinator Shane Waldron.
Yeah.
Let's not forget when he was in Seattle, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who they took in the first round, had some choice words to say about him because he felt like he wasn't getting used. And then you look at this Bears offense, right? They have a three-headed monster at receiver, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and you talked about it, Roma Dunze going in the first round. Well, Shane Waldron likes to use his tight ends. Yeah. Let's not forget, all three of those tight ends from Seattle last year got paid this offseason. There's a reason why they brought Everett in to play tight end next to Cole Kmet. So a lot of onus will be on Shane Waldron and trying to use these offensive pieces to try to get them involved to help Caleb Williams. So it'll be interesting to see how he employs those three receivers, even though he has two really good tight ends as well.
There are no excuses for anybody, though.
Yeah.
Like for the front office, for the coach, for the offensive coordinator. And there is talent there. Yep. They've got to produce.
Leger, I know you don't totally buy into this whole toughest schedule, easiest schedule based on last year's winning percentage, but the NFL, the way they do it, the best teams are supposed to have the hardest schedules. That's not necessarily the case, though, with the back-to-back champion Kansas City Chiefs. They're right in the middle of the pack, tied for 16th.
But that's what happens when your division has an overturn, right? Because the AFC West isn't as strong as it has been in recent years, right? The Kansas City Chiefs were the only team from that division to make the playoffs last year, DK. So when you look at it, people wonder what Gardner Minshew will be with the Raiders, right? The Broncos have a rookie quarterback. The Chargers, new offense with Jim Harbaugh. We'll see that philosophy change. They were a team that refused to run the ball. Well, DK, we know they're going to run the football now. So when you look at this, yes, they do have the AFC North, which is the toughest division. They have the Bills, who I think will actually struggle this year as well. But by strength of schedule, whether they middle of the pack has, because one, their division is not as strong. And I think the overturn of some of those teams that they'll be playing, even though they are the #1 seed, has been a lot different as well this year.
Plus, they get the NFC South, which we just talked about being one of the worst divisions out there. So you just hand it to them in a gift basket saying, here you go for history. See if you can get those 3 straight Super Bowl titles in a row. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah.
And you know what's always good is to be good and lucky, because that's what they are. You can make the argument they're great and lucky with the way the schedule fell. I think this team's going to be motivated. I think Andy Reid and the entire team is going to try to go for history, because everyone's been talking about that. And sometimes when you're a team that's this good, that's what you need, is some sort of motivation. And I think that's something that'll be held out in front of them, and I think they'll go get it.
And out of curiosity, I wanted to know where they were ranked the past couple of years. 2021, 11th. 2022, tied for the 5th most difficult schedule. Last year, they were 21st, so this year a little bit more difficult. But I mean, like you said, it's all over the place. It doesn't matter. The Chiefs are going to be the Chiefs.
You saw that graphic. No team going for a three-peat has ever even made the Super Bowl, made a championship game. The Chiefs are the favorites in the AFC, but not overall. That would be the San Francisco 49ers slightly. Chiefs plus 370. And then it's the Ravens, who had the best record in the league last season at plus 490.